So thank you very much for joining. I'll pretend there's a huge audience here. But the reason for this Zoom session is to officially launch this working group called Achieving Peace in Europe. So before I ask you to ask questions, etc., let me give you a little bit of introduction, including a preamble as to why I decided to create this working group.
Yes, please.
So now, most of us, I believe, share common values based on the principles of justice, equality, democracy, well-being, and harmony. Harmony, particularly if you live in China. These principles apply in the micro as well as in the macro, whether amongst a small group of people in your neighborhood, community, or country, or across the world and globally. They apply to the domains of politics, politics, economics, society, environment, and the planet at large. They apply to all of that. Thus, climate justice is an important sub-principle because we're not doing justice to the climate. They also apply to our actions, whether they're in the past, present, or future. And the future is particularly important because the planet's land, resources, and minerals are there not just for us, but we also have to make sure future generations have a part of that, and for all the planet's flora and fauna to continue to thrive. We can't use it all up.
Yes.
However, I believe there is one principle that stands in the way and stands out as a necessary precondition to us achieving all our other principles. And this is the principle of peace. Given there are 8 billion of us living in a small planet with limited land, resources, and minerals, if we spend a significant portion of our resources and money busy developing militaries and going to war, we're not going to have that much money and resources and people left to devote to developing all the other things we all we need to lead a good life. So peace is a necessary precondition before we can achieve all our other development goals.
Yes.
So and it is not that I object, that I'm a person who don't like fighting or would not fight if I was threatened. Nothing of that sort. It's just logical that if I want to develop equality, justice, harmony, democracy, I need to not be busy going to wars and spending money on wars. Recently, I stood for a town council in Harpenden, whose primary goals were fixing roads, potholes, parks, etc. Now, and we always complain there's not enough money, but if some of that money is going to build militaries and armies, we're going to have less to deal with basic necessities. So really, from a very practical point of view, we believe that in order to achieve all our desirable goals, we need to make sure there is peace. And given that we are living in Europe with its history of centuries of wars and 2 world wars, one of the 2 worst wars ever, I thought we had learned the lesson after World War II that we would never go to war again. But somehow peace has become a dirty word, and going to war and all that is fashionable and is encouraged in the media. To stand against this, I thought, let me develop a working group to basically discuss why peace is useful. And in particular, I wanted to achieve a resolution that we could send to our foreign secretary and to leaders of the EU of how to build our defense in a responsible way. So hence this working group one of the main outcomes would be to draft a resolution. I'm just looking it up now at the moment. Let me see. So the primary objective of the group, therefore, is to develop a resolution on defending Europe responsibly. And the two words, important words here, well, three important words: defend, Europe, responsibility. We need to define what these means, but in particular, we need to define what Europe means. I.e., where is the border, right? Otherwise, if you're not defending the border, that's the first primary goal. So I'm hoping that in our working group, we will be discussing issues like what is actually Europe, what are the borders of Europe, and also what does defense of Europe mean?
Yep.
Does it mean you go out and destroy the enemy before they even think of destroying you, or are you interested in defending if someone attacks you?
Yeah.
Right. And in the similar vein, is achieving peace in Europe desirable and possible, given that we've got 20 odd countries? We've got a younger generation of people who may not want to go to war. We need to discuss the desirability of defense and warfare, right? And if to be honest, most people, if you ask them, do you want to go to war or do you want to live your life peacefully? They will say, I don't want to go to war, right? So, and if that is the case, why are we then supporting objectives by the government to build armies, etc., and provoke a possible enemy and have warfare that could lead to disaster, right? So we could discuss, there are several topics we could discuss, can the UK and Europe bring to bear their huge influence and soft power instead of going to war, right? Are they more desirable than hard power? I mean, Britain, for a small country and an island, has a huge amount of soft power in its language, in its influence around the world based on its history. Can one not use that? Then we could also discuss how high is it a priority to rearm Europe? How high is that? Are we going to take money away from housing, from welfare, in order to put more money into defense? We need to know where does the balance lie? What are our other current priorities, including climate and other priorities?
Yep.
And finally, what should be Europe's long-term priorities? Is war and warfare our long-term priority, or is peace our priority? And if peace is our priority, can we not get to that point without having to undergo warfare? Can we not home in on removing enemies, if possible, reducing risk, building bridges with potential enemies, and therefore negate the possibility of the need of huge warfare costs, right? We should also be discussing who actually benefits from rearmament, because somebody is benefiting, right? And those beneficiaries, how are they influencing our decisions? How through their lobbies, etc. The other topic we could talk about is about the military-industrial complex, like that in the US, where that complex is actually also includes the media and academia. So it's called MIMAC, Military Industrial Media Academia Complex. Do we want something like that in Europe? And finally, another question: Does the UK suffer from amnesia about its past military-industrial complex and
Yes.
its past things? Right?
They certainly do.
It's because have we learned anything from the past, or are we just ignoring the past? Because the past quite often gives us valuable lessons for the future. Are
Yes.
we ignoring it at a cost? So these are some of the things we hope to discuss over the next few weeks as part of as part of coming out with a resolution. We can also recommend books, articles, media links, and attending conferences across the world, basically. So those are the goals. At the moment, the working group consists of myself, the convener, Tony Wills from UNA Harpenden, Dr. Roger Bentley from UNA Harpenden, and Lauren Muir from UNA UK. She's part of the UNA UK committee. I was hoping she would join us, but I think this group will take time to enlarge, right? So I'll have to coax it with emails, links, Zoom discussions, etc., and slowly build up. I think I may even have to start drafting parts of the resolution before people get involved, right? But I think it'd be amiss of us to talk about peace and not do something to influence the government to move away from warfare and building military complexes, basically. So that's my summary of what the whole working group is about. What's your take, Roger? I mean, what were you expecting, or is there additional stuff we could be doing as part of this work group?
Right. I've got a number of more detailed comments we'll come to later.
Right.
The first thing to say is, what's your time frame? I haven't got that clearly in my brain.
Right. The time frame is to write a policy resolution by early 2026 to submit to the policy committee of UNA Laser that convenes January, February, and go through their selection process and iterations and drafting and challenges before a final version is submitted in April to, for example, the last time, this April, they submitted one to David Lamy and the FCDA, and they responded.
Does only one resolution get through? Are we going to be competing with 50 others with much more likely chance?
There'll be multiple resolutions
that go through?
That go through, yes.
Only one goes through?
No, multiple. For example, over the years we have accumulated, let's say 3 dozen resolutions. Maybe a dozen is out of date, but every year we update it. For example, peacekeepers, for example, or climate change. These resolutions are ongoing.
Okay, it's good to know.
And there's a website I can share with you that lists all of them. And I can share with you the response from FCDO on the past resolutions.
That would be interesting.
So in 2026, I'm sure there will be some existing resolutions that get minimally updated, and about 5-10% of new ones. Just by example, last year I wrote one brand new resolution on India about the protection of minorities.
Yes, quite right, and very, very, very important.
Very important, and most people are loath to say anything or keep quiet or whatever.
Did it get through? Did it get to?
Well, it got through the policy committee with one. Well, there were lots of interesting challenges. One person in the action bit, I sort of demanded the UK government openly and clearly stand out for these principles.
Yes.
And most of the committee disagreed, because they said, well, based on our history, we can't say that.
Oh,
I mean, that's what
you're going rubbish. Exactly, Suhail. Based on our history, we've got ever stronger case to say
exactly.
It. We know better what happened. We know who we who we promoted, who we didn't promote, who we funded, who went into the military, who didn't. We know it all.
So if you did something wrong in the past, this is the time to say, no, we're not going to do the same thing tomorrow.
And we understand the problem. Absolutely, Suhan.
You know,
yes, yes,
so
yes.
it's a chance to stay. The future will be better. We will be better ourselves. Future generations will stand for better things. But no, they're just hanging on to the past.
So it
not
didn't
discussing.
Yes, so it didn't get through the final selection phase at UNA
It
Labour?
did. I had to modify it by saying that the UK government will support the Human Rights Commission's objectives. So I just sort of, they will support them and let the human rights do their bit. We're not gonna, all we're gonna do is just say, yes, please do that.
And did it go to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, or whatever it's called?
Yes, it did. And the final one was okay, because the message was clear as to what was wrong with the Indian government. And it went through, and funnily enough, David Lammy and his team responded to most of the other resolutions, but kept zero, quiet, no comment. And they didn't even have the courtesy to say, we've read it. But wow, we know they have read it. Because
and you can resubmit next year, can't you? Onto this thing you say now.
Next year.
Once
yes,
they're live, you can keep
them.
Right. Oh, okay, that's good. That's really.
Right. We know they have read it.
Yes.
Because the way they have responded to the other resolutions in detail, we know somebody has been reading it in detail. So that's the objective, is to influence their thinking. I mean, we know for various reasons that very recently Britain did a sort of deal with India, so they didn't want to scupper that. So I understand that. But they could have, surely they could have come up with some wording that that said, we believe in human rights and we believe India should do the same. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. So that's a couple of new ones went last year, this year. So next year will be hopefully our resolution. So by January we should come up with a resolution. And I'm not saying we should be saying stop war in Europe, because that's just not feasible. Every sovereignty, every group of nations need to be able to defend themselves. So defending your self-responsibility is a practical way of saying, yes, defense is good, but you need to focus on the defense and, reduce the need of enemies that could attack you. So these are some of the things we could focus on and in our discussions. I think the discussions will be quite interesting. And we can also publish some of our discussion papers on the website, etc. Hopefully gather more people. So let's see, it's the beginning today. Hopefully we will get more support as people want become more vocal. Any other questions?
Yes, a lot, of course. Yeah. There's nothing like. So some comments. Since it looks at the moment it's between you and me, I'll make some comments kind of between you and me, although they broaden out. The first one, you've told me the deadline to schedule, which is very encouraging. Well, it's time to do some useful work, including, as you say, position papers along the way and so on, to kind of move the thing along. That's one. Two, as I said to you right at the beginning, regretfully at the moment, for at least quite a while, perhaps half a year, I will not be pulling my weight, and I apologize about that. Only today I was sweating in between looking after helping to look after the grandchild. I was, I've got to see, my wife says don't talk too loud. Looking after the grandchild, I was writing a paper on oil. And then there's other things and family things and stuff. So I won't be able to pull my weight in the way that I'd like to. That's two. Oh, my sweetie, this was three. Three is I won't talk too loud.
Sure. I think the main thing is even your silent presence, be able to read and comment here and there is better than nothing.
Yes, no, I'll do my best, and I do. I understand. Three is as you said before, I see this as partly a stepping stone to help to get my own agenda, which is stopping war altogether, forward, just to get the ideas out and up. So if indeed it just finishes up as an annex or another working paper that gets to the Foreign Commonwealth Office, or whatever they're called these days, that will be useful. I certainly hope to get those ideas up. And you remember, Suhail, there were 3 bits to my proposal, which is one, to try and suggest some ways to avoid war, stop war, some ideas in there to do it, science-based ideas that I've been trying to push, but also just to encourage all those who are working in this general peace area, to realize that we're a long way forward in what we need to do. And that's what I bang on about in the document you so generously helped, really pertinently helped improve, Suhail. The 4-pager, now 5-pager, saying how to end this. Fundamentally, ending war is much closer. The possibility of ending war is much closer than most of us think, because a huge amount of the groundwork has already been done in peace treaties, in arms treaties, in the United Nations bodies, in international courts. I mean, the international courts are coming up step by step in a way that wasn't even true 15 years ago. So, a lot of the groundwork has been done. And then with your help, I suggested some steps that would take us at the UN pushes over. So that's a kind of background that I liked happy this European thing. The next one is, we are in a very tricky place to make this argument. I fully support making it, but the tricky place is the Ukraine war. Nation after nation is frightened. At least the Eastern European nations are frightened by Russian aggression. They're all ramping up their defense budgets, as you know, or trying to ramp them up, partly pushed by Trump, but mainly pushed by fear of Russia. Several of those Eastern European nations have exited from the anti-personal mine agreements, the big international anti-personal mine agreements. They've exited from it because they want to lay mines along their borders so the Russians don't come in very quickly. So we are pushing rather against a hard nut. I fully agree we need to. I fully agree we need to raise these ideas. And if Ukraine gets partly resolved in 2 or 3 years, that really helps us, because then the broader message comes across later. But that's another thought. And lastly, on the waste of war, the war is just awful, as we all know. But the defense budgets are still only... Well, they went down to, we had what was called the peace dividend, which you remember, because we thought that fighting in Europe and the Cold War was going away. We put more and more of our money into social services and less into defense. And I saw the figures just the other day. It was kind of a nice trade-off. The more that went into social services and hospitals was almost exactly what had been saved from the defense budget. So that now all European Western nations are in a real quandary. They want to bring their defense budgets back up, but at the same time, they face immense pressures from their societies if they want to cut the social spending. And we've just had it with the hospital thingy and so on and so forth. So it's going to be incredibly difficult to spend more on defense at the same time as covering our social security, but it's not very much. It is only a few percent of GDP, as you know, that we spend on defense. So it's not the strongest of arguments, even though it's got great validity. Much stronger is perhaps just avoiding the wars and the bloodshed and the terror and the killing and the awful things.
Well, I mean, one reason why it sounds bigger than what it is, I know it's about 5%, but in the accounting for it, there's a lot that happens that are not taken into account. Number one. Secondly, it allows the governments to divert you into thinking about enemy, the fear, and to take you away from thinking about your real problems. So by saying, oh, there's an enemy about to attack you, they're diverting your attention away from the inequality, injustice, all sorts of problems in society. And the hidden cost of that is massive.
I fully agree with that, and Suhail, that's a very good point. Please, I'm my pen has just run out, so my notes stop here.
Yes,
So please put that clearly into what you're going to
absolutely.
discuss. The
Because when
business of
we
the
discuss,
trying to remove the unjustified fears of
yes,
others, trying to get around what they want and they don't want.
yes,
I have a different take from you on some of the issues, Suhail. I don't think it will ever really resolve.
no,
I'm much more an anti-Putin man, see him as really in the molds of Mussolini and Hitler and Milosevic and all these others. I see him in that mold, and the more I read, the more I believe that really is the case.
I mean,
But
what do you read? Where do you get your information? Unless you have talked to him personally. No.
I haven't, but I know I do take the Western liberal view fairly. That's most of my media, but I do try and read widely and look into who really said what actually happened. And the horror, the one I read the other day is the horrors of all those Ukrainians who are in Russian jails. Immense numbers were taken from those. Oh, sorry, my wife says quieter. Immense numbers were taken from those occupied regions, immense numbers, thousands and thousands, and they're all in Russian jails in most appalling conditions.
I mean,
And
all
we,
I can say is that firstly, we don't know who to believe and what to believe. That I'm sure you'll accept that. It's very difficult to know who's doing what, because in warfare, truth is the first casualty. We all know that. So knowing that, to base your judgment on lies is not a good judgment. So we just have to not jump to conclusion just from what we know. But the other thing I think that our governments and the Western government are very good at is to build up fear of the other. For example, when India and Pakistan, went to sort of started war, a European would say, "What are they doing? They should stop it," right? Well, why don't you apply the same theory to ourselves, right?
I see all that, Suhail. You are right, and we do need to. Well, that's one of the places that, again, coming back to my document, we now have a lot better commissions that go in and look. For instance, we looked at not Saddam Hussein, the other one, the Syrian leader, and when he used chemical weapons, and he used them. There were both sides of the argument. Didn't use it, did use it. Slowly, we got all the experts together. They spent a lot of time and money and got to the bottom of it, and finally made it. It takes a long time. It takes several years.
It does.
We've just had the ICO, the International Civil Aviation Authority, make a final opinion on the Ukrainian civil aircraft that was shot down by the Russians. After a lot of work and detail and taking bits from the crash and all the rest of it, they've now just, it was almost certainly an accident, a pure, simple military accident, but now they're 99% sure it was a Russian missile that took it down.
Well, Russian or maybe Ukrainians. Not Putin didn't say shoot that down.
No. I think it was from Ukrainian hands, Russian missile from Ukrainian hands who thought they were doing the right thing. And we had a much worse case, of course. The Americans shot down the Iranian, Iraqi. I think it was an Iraqi plane they shot down many years ago by accident.
Well, it was the Iranian commercial airliner of 200 people they shot down.
It was Iranian, you're right.
Yes, and in revenge of that, the Iranians joined up with the Libyans to do the same to Pan Am. So that's the thing. You see, we listen, we hear a lot about what our so-called enemy is doing, but the amount that when I say we, I mean the US is the single most powerful country with 800 bases around the world, so much money, and the CIA, its power and its ability to do harm has done so much, and we don't hear about it. It's all hidden. So
I quite agree. If you remember in my and in fact, did you draw my attention to? I think you did, Suhail. But in my document on stopping war, there was this long list of wars that America's been in, with the death counts taken from Wikipedia, and then you just the other day, before and in the recent thing, identified this document out of the American Congress or whatever it was, or Senate, saying how many
it was me who said that. And so that's what I'm saying is when we take a stand, we sort of pretend we are saints, right?
That's
And
right. No, I completely
we
agree. And this
pretend
is
we are
sort of,
saints, and the other side is Hitler. The Putin is a Hitler. But looking at it from space, you might actually say, who is actually more Hitlerite? Who has killed
no,
millions of people in the last 70 years?
it's all true, but
You know, uh,
motivation. But anyway, it's a very important point to bring into the
so,
document we put
so the
there. Yes,
conclusion should be, let's all not blame each other and have this, say, other side is worse, is to actually stop the war, right?
I
And
quite agree with that, but
yeah,
we will also need these commissions that need to go in and do the detailed forensic checking of who actually did what. You follow me? So,
yes.
I mean,
uh,
America with its awful chemicals into Laos, just a nightmare.
I
What was
know.
the
and
chemical
and the
blue?
Nord Stream, for example, who did the Nord Stream? I mean, if it, you know we sort of keep quiet that, oh, we can't do that, but if Russia were pointed that Russia did it to ours, we would be up in arms.
Yeah, no, we think
So,
Nord Stream was probably Ukrainians, isn't that the
well,
latest?
with the US support, because without
Yes,
US they would never have. So, so what I'm saying is being one, we have to be even-handed. You know,
we have to be even-handed and we
justice
have
is
to be
justice.
scientific. You're quite
Yes,
right, Suhan. Both
rational,
we
scientific,
agree, rational,
and
scientific,
and
even-handed.
not fall into the fear factor.
No, or the
Yeah,
automatic we're saints and they're the
that's
devils.
right.
That's right. That's
That's right.
completely right. And
So,
we better find a good phrase or a paragraph or something that says that quite clearly, fairly
yes,
early on.
that's
I'm
right.
looking forward to seeing your draft, Sue.
Well, it'll be based. I mean, I don't know if you read my minorities protection of minorities resolution.
I did, yes, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't based on a prejudice of this or that. It was
No,
based
no.
on laws and logic.
I've read about half the things you've sent, or maybe two-thirds. I read
Right,
perhaps two-thirds of the
right,
things you sent. I've got a few more to read, but they're all in a folder called
right,
Important Information from Suhail to be read.
right. So, so
To be read urgently. Important information
yes.
from Suhail to be urgently read.
So, so yeah, no, I think we will succeed if we can put aside all this emotional and fear factor stuff and focus on peace, not just necessarily for us, but for future generations, right? Um, because it's a and the other thing is, when we go to war, well, when the West goes to war, the deaths are mainly the other, whether it's
That
brown
is
people, Chinese people,
so far that
these
has
other,
been true in
and
all those wars we're talking about,
yeah,
by
and
and
we are
large.
totally blasé about it. We're totally callous. We don't care. But if there was one, if Ireland was bombed by Britain, people would be up in arms.
Yes, I
Yeah,
completely agree. The factor, in some cases, it's a factor of 10 or something or more,
exactly.
a factor of 100 in some of those
Yeah. I mean,
wars.
look at Palestine. People are dying, and we say, well, what word are they using? Will they do it? I mean, it's just farcical.
Fortunately, you've seen the recent political moves in the last few days, Suhail. Finally, France, Canada, Britain
Yeah,
are
but
all beginning to say enough.
beginning, but
I know. I take
yeah,
the caveats, but at least finally people are saying. Now, don't forget, I wrote to the UN, and indeed you helped, didn't you? I forget. I wrote saying Gaza should have, when the first terrorist attack took place, it was obvious it was going to implode and be awful, or fairly obvious, you're never sure. And I said it should have been made a UN protectorate that day.
yeah,
And at that point, the French were seen as fairly supportive, so French military could have gone in, perhaps, and one or two others, the Egyptian perhaps, combined together and kept the peace, rounded up those who were actually involved in not
yeah.
just the ordinary supporters, but those actually involved in the crime, relatively small number, a few hundred or thousand, and
But
then.
it wouldn't have happened without America's
No,
support.
no, you'd have had to have America's support too. But
Yeah,
Biden was in power. Don't forget, Biden
yeah,
was in power. So
yeah.
I still feel there was a huge missed opportunity, and
I
to
know.
some extent, I have blood on my hands, not for having pushed it more strongly.
So yeah, let's hope that we can achieve something, because what will happen is these diversions get in the way, and we don't achieve our final objective.
I would like to think, Suhal, by putting these ideas forward in the time frame you're suggesting, so they get into the thinking in
Yeah, yeah,
2026 and so
yeah,
on, at the right time to help all, if unless we blow ourselves up nuclearly, but in the right time, hopefully, to help the direction we need from this point forward, and put these, whatever they 10, 12 points clearly together, and then a cognitive argument between them, and then a few annexes explaining a bit more. And if it gets into the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, whatever what is the office called that day? For
FCDO, Foreign Commonwealth Development Office.
Well, of course I know, because ODA got what pushed into them. We killed ODA, which was very active when I was young or younger, and they pushed it in FCDO. Yeah. So if we can get into that thinking and be part of the analysts who think that would be just brilliant, brilliant.
So what I'll do in the next steps is to say what sort of elements should be part of the composition of the resolution.
Yes.
To what's in, what's out, and then find pieces that we could quote or link to, with this resolution or that charter or this law, and to build up a rational case for the resolution. It won't be easy, but whereas India was self-contained, it was easier to write that. But Europe is the toughest nut to crack,
I don't know. Yes, perhaps. I'm hoping that on one aspect that Europe has already got a long way along the thinking needed for this. That's my optimism, Suhail. An awful lot of people in Europe think along the lines of what you're saying. You follow me? It's not mainstream. It's not this. We're in the same traps we've had for years, but I would like to think that we're a long, long way.
Can you point to some articles, books, treaties, or anything? I mean, if you come across them, pass it to me.
Yes.
Because that's what we'll build on these things, not just what we think, but actual things that had happened.
Yes.
I may also invite Mr. Oberg, the Swedish guy, peace guy. I don't know if you've come across him.
Say it again. Who?
Jan Oberg.
No, I don't think so.
He's a peace activist. I might ask him to, I would love him to be part of this working group, but I could invite him to give a talk. It'll be a Zoom talk to UNA. So we can get ideas from other. It's not easy to find people who talk about peace any longer. I mean, I know that, for example, the Labour guy, what's his name, Corbyn, he would talk.
He would, but I have reservations about Mr. Corbyn.
Yeah, he might get.
But so in that sense, you're right. In that sense, we're both right, Suhail. You're correct in saying this discussion of peace and all the rest of it is not high, not even not high profile. It's just not really on the table or on the agenda.
Yes.
But I am right, and I'm sure I am, that at the other end, in terms of what most Europeans think, what most European politicians, the way they think, the whole business of resolving issues, conciliation, peace, getting the other side to understand where you are, getting off ramp so that people like Putin can come out with their dignity intact-ish. You follow me? So I think
can I say
in a way that wasn't true, let's say in 1914. In 1914, everybody I've read about, every single person I've read about in 1914 felt, on both sides, the German side and the British side, felt this was a just war. We're going into it, it'll be over by Christmas, and it's what brave young people do. We go and fight for our needs.
But can I just say something against that thinking? Because
please do.
Easy to quote 1940 and look, now we're in 1914.
Yep.
Easy to quote faraway time, and to say, look how well we are. I'll give you one example. Development, poverty.
Yes.
In the last 50, 60 years, that was a key goal of the United Nations. We to talk about poverty, and we started giving aid and all that. But when you look at the real figures, poverty has hardly improved, and in some sense is sort of either standing still or going backwards. But the facade and all the jargon in the newspaper article is that we should boast ourselves of having done this or that, but the facts are actually pretty poor. So
Suhan, that's a very important point. I need to look at that.
yes, I can
I
give you a
certainly,
book.
for
I can,
years and years, I was working in development projects and overseas projects
yeah, yeah,
and alternative technology and all that
yeah,
stuff. I worked in those areas.
yeah.
For quite a while, significant progress was
Yes.
made in reducing, but I haven't looked at the numbers over the
Well,
last few
I can
decades.
give you a good book to read. Is Jason Hickel, Less is More. His first few chapters started with development, what a poor show it was. And based on that, he uncovered other lies that we have told ourselves. And we patted our back because it was used as a subterfuge to say, we're doing good things, trust us, we are genuine, you know. So this peace thing that you think is all could be another facade,
I
right?
hope so.
We just have to put real progress rather than compared to 1914 or whatever.
Couldn't agree more, so hard, because this pen has no longer got ink in it from 10 minutes ago. If you could send a reference to that book, I'd
Yes, yes,
love to
yes,
see it.
yes. I mean, I'm not a skeptic by nature, but when I read facts and history, I know what lies I've been told that are lies, right? So I don't try to rely on lies to build up my case. It has to be real things and you know what's happening now rather than how great we are over the last 100 years, if you know what I mean.
Suhan, I could not agree with you more. I could not agree with you more. We are both scientists. You're
Yeah,
an astrophysicist.
yeah.
I was
Yeah,
astronomer by
yeah,
thing. I'm just a humble physicist and chemist,
right,
humble compared to astronomy.
right.
But we both adhere, and it's very nice when I work on the oil thing too. The
Yeah,
people I'm mainly working with are all good scientists, and we're all prepared for new information,
yes,
change our views if we get new information, just as
yes,
Einstein or somebody said. All prepared for that, all prepared to have a different perspective brought to us, and all wanting our statements to be based on reality.
I know. And the best example I can quote is Israel. Israel has created such a false story about themselves that the people truly believe that they're doing good,
Yes,
you know,
yes.
and that we are not far behind in the West, you know, because it's a Western game. I mean, they have adopted the Western style. I mean, it's a Western settler colony, and they are the number one experiment in psyop, if you know what I mean.
No, what's PSYOP?
Psychology operations.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And that's the frontier. So we can learn from that and see where we're not far behind in some of the mistakes we are making, right? And I'm not saying it to demean ourselves. I'm saying it, if we can learn about our
Yes,
false motives,
yes,
we
yes.
can be much better as human beings.
And
As
you remember that famous quote, and I think we talked about it before, the one about there is a book I'll find it, or a comment or an article or something, where the senior people in the Kennedy government, I guess it was, anyway, the people who took us into the Vietnam War and then
yeah,
escalated the Vietnam War were all well-educated
yeah,
Harvard graduates. And there's some phrase or document I saw a reference just the other day saying, how could us good boys from Harvard,
yeah,
Western leaning, democratic
yeah,
justice,
yeah,
finishing up having one of the most awful colonial wars you could imagine. You follow me?
yes,
And
that's right,
that has to be understood too. How
yes,
can, and they're
yes,
all well motivated, they're all well educated. It's all
yes,
partly seeing, the communists as such an awful alternative that we can justify anything to stop them doing. And that's
exactly.
part of the problem,
Yep,
justifying.
I know.
See,
Because for years they've used this theory that if Vietnam falls, they'll take over, and we're
yes.
using similar theory with Putin. If Ukraine falls, he'll come over and take over. To me, it sounds similar.
Well, it is similar. I have to
Yeah,
say, Suhail, here's where you have a difference.
yeah.
To this day, that was called the what theory? Domino theory.
Dominance. Yeah,
To this day, do not actually know if the domino theory, which was used for so much bloodshed, was correct or not correct. Communism
correct.
had been exploding around the world. Many
Has it?
nasty little many
Well,
nasty little countries were becoming. Look at France and Italy. They all nearly went communist after the Second World War.
yeah,
It was a long, hard battle to stop and to stop them being communist. Now,
yeah,
it was Franco in Spain who had his horrible civil war
yes.
with lots of killing and the most awful thing, but it was to stop communism coming in because they had
Yeah,
a
well, at
capitalist,
what cost? You had the brutal dictator.
unbelievable cost. And
Yes. So
if
I
communism,
wouldn't call that a victory.
no, it's not a
Everybody
victory.
lost.
No, it's not a victory. It was a terrible loss.
Yeah.
But it was this philosophy. And the older I get, Suel, the more I understand that many wars are driven by philosophies, not just
Yeah.
defend myself, but it is philosophies. I'm so worried about the communisms, or the communists. I'm so worried about capitalists, or
And
this.
but
I'm so worried.
if you look at this communist ideology, and the West was afraid of that, and they saw in Asia and Africa these countries, but these were just using communism to free themselves, liberate themselves from colonization.
And effectively, that's what Vietnam was. You're completely right.
Exactly.
When
Nothing to do with communism.
when truth
Really.
comes to something, it was nothing to do with. To be fair, of course, it was the Vietnamese communists who said to the workers, and that's what happened in China.
Yeah.
We get rid of the landlords for you and give you the land from the landlords. The landlords will be evil to you, will give you the land. That's where they got their support base, strong support base,
Yeah.
give
Yeah.
you the land. And that's what happened in China. And of course, I see it all through Young May's relatives and so on. But no, to me, there's a big question. But I quite agree. It was awful. And we've got to get rid of the isms.
Yes.
You see the other guy as
Ism
the,
on both sides, both
yes,
and liberalism, capitalism,
yes.
all as if these are God-made theories. No,
Yes.
they are faulty and they need to evolve.
Couldn't agree with you
Yeah,
more.
they need to evolve.
Sharia, you're a knowledgeable geezer. You're a knowledgeable fella.
So let's end here, but I think we've covered a huge ground here, which will form the basis of our stuff, because these are the issues we need to lay to rest, as it were, and come to a way forward.
Yes.
Yeah, So thank you for attending. I think what time is it now? It's
8:30,
yeah,
as you said. Brilliant. 7:30, 8:30. Couldn't be better.
could have been better. So thank you very much, Roger, and I will try and drum up more support
We
in the
will.
future.
We'll clearly get more support. There's plenty of people who want to think like this. Plenty of people who want to respond, I'm sure, out there. Suhal, you've done a brilliant job.
Thank you
I'm
very much.
honored to be a small part of the team.
Sure. Thank you very much for your support, Roger. We'll see you again, and might see you on June the 14th.
Hang on, let me double check. That was the next meeting?
That's the next about Palestinians in Israel.
I think we're away on another walk.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're away on another walk. But I will try not to miss too many, but we've got
Sure.
these walks around the coast
Okay.
that we take part in. Yeah.
Good. Okay, Roger. Take care. Thanks for attending.
Thank you, sir. You're a gentleman. Thank you kindly.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.